over the last 3 weeks, I had the privilege of studying and visiting the Pittsburgh Public School System. So this presentation is about some of the stereotypes associated with urban education centers. I'd like to compare and contrast one of the best schools in the Pittsburgh Public School System against one of the worst schools in the Pittsburgh Public School System, and then talk a little bit about what roles the teachers play in urban education centers. So let's start with the issue of stereotypes. It's one of the biggest issues concerning urban education. How white middle-class America really views the ghetto or the hood. You know, they view it typically as violent, out of control, drug-infested, gang-ridden, etc., etc. And look, you're not a racist or a bigot for holding those stereotypical views. Unfortunately, urban education centers has been sensationalized or have been sensationalized and misportrayed by Hollywood, the media, and these stereotypes have really become part of our culture. And the stereotypes couldn't be further from the truth also. So the goal is to confront these stereotypes, illustrate the inaccuracies, and pass that on to the people who are not so familiar with urban culture so they get a true picture of what goes on within urban education. Just some additional stereotypes that couldn't be further from the truth about urban education. The facilities in the Pittsburgh Public School System were well maintained. They were modern facilities. Student populations, you know, again, these aren't students that are out of 187 or Dangerous Minds that Hollywood sensationalized. These are polite young men and women. Not a single gang also in the Pittsburgh Public School System. If you want to talk about a stereotype, just about everybody I've come in contact with thinks gangs are prevalent in Pittsburgh. They are not. Parents absolutely care about their kids in the Pittsburgh Public School System. Unfortunately, these parents are often undereducated and don't know how to start the college process or start the post-school process. All the teachers I've come in contact with are very well trained. They're aware of the challenges they face. I think they are scapegoats in this entire system failure. And money, it's a myth that money's going to fix everything. Well, listen, Westinghouse spent $30 to $50 million last year on their building, on their resources. Still the worst performing school in the city, maybe the entire state. So Braddock Hills High School and Westinghouse High School, both in the Pittsburgh Public School System. Braddock Hills, one of the best performing schools. Westinghouse, the absolute worst performing school in Pittsburgh. And you can kind of see some of the difference here. Of course, Braddock Hills is a charter school. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But Braddock Hills seemed to have much more effective leadership. The working staff there believed in that leadership. There was certainly a culture of success, a very nice facility and a shopping mall, somewhat diverse, 85% African American, different family and financial backgrounds certainly. When you look at Westinghouse, like I said, lowest performing school in the city, different classroom norms, not necessarily that culture of success. It's a huge, modern, nice facility, but it lacks diversity, 100% African American, and this is a poor, dying neighborhood as well. So let's talk a little bit about that culture of success that was so evident at Braddock Hills High School. Their leadership, they believed in their leadership. Everybody was on the same page. Teaching force at Westinghouse had little faith in their leaders, principals, and administrators. Braddock Hills, very organized. Every single minute of the day was accounted for. At Westinghouse, how about student schedules weren't even established until Thanksgiving? So it definitely lacks organization. Expectations. Braddock Hills, students are expected to succeed at Braddock Hills, whereas students are just expected to pass on to the next level at Westinghouse regardless of their performance. It's almost a time constraint at Westinghouse. Do the time as a sophomore, you become a junior. The attitude at Braddock Hills, much more friendly than Westinghouse. There was an attitude of friendliness, cooperation. Teachers wanted to be there. Westinghouse had little cooperation, low morale from what I could tell, and little hope for the future. And finally, Braddock Hills was incredibly consistent. School-wide discipline code, expectations, and standards remained consistent. Westinghouse, for crying out loud, they had 3 different principals, didn't even have their schedules formed by Thanksgiving. So that environment absolutely lacks consistency. Some other major differences, class size. At Braddock Hills, they averaged between 12 and 20 students per class. Westinghouse was pushing 35, and that was really a theme at all the urban education centers we went to over the last 3 weeks. Class size, so important to learning. At Braddock Hills, college preparation is huge. There's deliberate and practical career or college skill education courses. Westinghouse, the student we interviewed, his post-secondary goal was to work at McDonald's, if you can believe that. At Braddock Hills, again, there's a cooperative environment. Teachers understand, as research suggests, that cooperative and collaborative environments make for better student attitudes, better learning outcomes. That wasn't really prevalent at Westinghouse. And remember, this is the same school system. Alderdice, Braddock Hills, they have more courses, more options, more opportunities than the students at Westinghouse. Why is that? Your guess is as good as mine. Data driven at Braddock Hills. There's an emphasis on research to ensure that students are getting the instruction that benefits them. At Westinghouse, no research at all. So then the question becomes, why is Braddock Hills so much better off if they're in the same school system? And really, I think it comes down to the culture. That blend of leadership, positive attitudes, positive expectations and standards, consistency, and investment in the students. I really come back to that attitude. I mean, it was so positive at Braddock Hills, not so much at Westinghouse. But this is clear evidence also at the failure, need for reform in the Pittsburgh Pittsburgh public school system. When you have schools in the same district at polar opposites of the spectrum, something needs to change. I think that change can start with good urban educators. We talked to Gabriel, a senior at Westinghouse High School. This is the same boy I mentioned earlier who wanted to work at McDonald's after high school, but he was so well spoken, he was aware of his situation in Homewood, and a really, really bright kid. He was college material, if you ask me, but again, his school kind of let him down. Not kind of, did let him down in that process. But here's what Gabriel said makes a good teacher at Westinghouse. Crack a joke every once in a while. Be human. Don't try and be too cool. The kids can tell if you're being a fake. And teach me something of value every day, something I can use in the real world. Engage me. Compel me to learn. Give me something I can use. So how do you become a good urban educator? Well, really, there aren't many differences between an urban educator and a suburban educator when you consider these points. You got to build strong relationships with your students. Students need trusting, caring role models they can count on. You need to be invested, enthusiastic, and dedicated to your students. Again, no different if you were a teacher in inner city Chicago or Clay Battelle right up the road. These are basic student needs from a teacher. Take your responsibility seriously. You have to want to be there. You have to strive to make a difference in the student's life. And again, the biggest key, perhaps the biggest separation from being an urban educator to a suburban teacher, urban educators need to be culturally responsive. So culturally responsive teaching recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. Of course, culture really is the center of learning. So as a culturally responsive teacher, you want to connect the curriculum to the everyday lives of your students. You want to relate material on a personal and academic level to your students. You want to embrace, understand, and become a part of your students' culture. You want to know who your students are, and that doesn't mean just in the school. That means within the community. You got to walk the streets, visit homes, play sports, do things like that. Some other keys to cultural responsiveness: be practical, relatable in your instruction. Remember what Gabe said. Teach him something he can use every single day. Collaboration and cooperation. Hear those words again. Working together is so important to establish meaningful learning outcomes for your students, especially for those teachers who may be new to the urban culture and teaching. It's a constantly evolving and developing process, so be an active participant in professional development. Seminars, reflections, training and practice sessions, all these types of things that develop skills and expose us to research are critical to being culturally responsive teachers. Let's take a look at what it takes to be a candidate for urban education, because a lot of pre-service teachers do want to help underprivileged inner city kids. They want to teach in urban environments, but do they have the commitment to the culture or the cultural background for that matter to succeed? So to be a candidate in an urban education setting, you must become an agent of the community, not just in school like we talked about a minute ago, within the community, walking the streets, visiting homes, playing sports, volunteering for community events, all part of being a good urban educator. You must have the attitude that urban centers are venues of hope, values, and promise. Create lessons that tie curriculum to student lives, and hopefully create social action and awareness within the community as well. Obviously, you got to combat racism and stereotypes, and you must want to be there. Kind of comes back to the attitude we talk about, but you know, a positive attitude will only increase the chances of an urban educator succeeding, and thus his students succeeding as well. Let's talk a little bit about student needs. Good school or bad school, students often share the same needs. Let's investigate some of those. Obviously, students need supportive environments, and when we're talking about some of these student needs, I want you to think about, are the needs of urban education students really any different than the needs of suburban students? For example, at both school and in home, students in both environments, they must know they're cared for. They must receive encouragement and positive reinforcement. They need to be challenged. They need to be expected to succeed. And they need to be prepared for the next stage of life, whether that's college, the workforce, whatever it may be. They need to be ready. They must have options available to them when they graduate high school. Another huge student need, perhaps the biggest student need, getting their parents involved. And parents need to know they are needed and wanted as well. They need to know that their child's success is a collaborative effort with the school and their home life. And you know, we hold our students to expectations. Why not hold our parents to expectations as well? Let them know that they are expected to contribute to their student success in school, contribute to their extracurricular activities and such. And really, you know, parents and teachers have a lot of tension. From what I've seen in my past experience, a lot of tension in their relationships. We need to bridge that gap, become more friendly with parents, and really become invested not just in the student, but become invested in that student's family as well. So as we talk about those needs again, I'd like you to think, or at least take away from this presentation, are the needs of urban education students really that different than the needs of suburban education students? Here's just a little review of what we talked about today. What has to change to make urban education centers more competitive and more on par if you will, with some of the suburban education centers out there. Of course, we need to destroy stereotypes. I pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, so many stereotypes are perpetuated and so many stereotypes are just absolutely false. We need stronger leadership. We need stronger administrators, stronger money managers, stronger principals. There needs to be a culture change within urban education schools, a lot like Braddock Hills. And again, I don't think it's just because Braddock Hills is a charter school. I think it's just a good school, a culture change. There needs to be higher expectations, better attitudes amongst teachers. We need to strive for success for our students. We need to be invested. There must be a better way to evaluate teachers too. Obviously, as an aspiring teacher, I want that contract. I want to be able to become tenured, but we also have to find a way to weed out some of the teachers that are bringing our profession down, and we have to be data driven. We have to use research. We have to use instruction that we know is absolutely improving our students' proficiency, absolutely improving their academic skill set. So if you do find yourself at a school that is in serious need of a culture change, and I understand it can be a massive, massive undertaking, but remember your responsibility as a teacher. You have a responsibility to that student, to that school. You want to make sure that student gets the best academic skill set he possibly can, and he's prepared for his life after school. And remember, just do what benefits everybody, not only the student, but again, the school, the community. All these things have to be considered if you're going to be a culturally responsive, good urban educator. I think if I could sum up these last 3 weeks in about 20 words or less, it would be this last slide here. Better attitudes equal a better culture equals a better school. We need more organization, leadership, and efficiency, especially in the Pittsburgh public school system when you see huge gaps between places like Alderdice and Braddock Hills to where Westinghouse is at. And really, as an urban educator, you want to change the way students look at themselves. Obviously, they're going to come, in most cases, from impoverished, underprivileged families. Change the way students look at themselves. Change what they can do with their future. Thanks for listening.